European astronaut is participating in the Lunar Artemis 3 mission. The announcement is one of the highlights of this year's Berlin Air and Space Show. Here to discuss European space endeavors, I'm pleased to be joined by Ludwig Moeller, the director of the European Space Policy Institute. Director Miller,
thank you for having me.
How significant is it to have the Italian Luca Parmitano join the Artemis 3 crew?
Well, I think it's a positive sign in the sense that a European astronaut on an activity that goes towards the moon. It is not a moon mission, as we know. It is still Earth orbit. But I think these missions are important for two reasons. One, it is a sign of transatlantic cooperation at a time when things are more complex. And secondly, I think it is also an element of buy-in in a nation, in that case Italy, but also in Europe, to the topic of exploration, and astronauts are a symbol of that.
We also see European technology back in the Artemis mission. European Service Module, NASA announced that it would use it in the Orion spacecraft once again. Do you think this is also a sign of transatlantic cooperation and perhaps also European excellence?
I think it is both, yes. It's certainly excellence, because the performance that we have seen on Artemis 2 is extraordinary. It is also a necessity. I think the US has realized that this is a capability that is useful, and in fact they are talking about more missions towards the moon. There is discussion now on Module 7 and 8, so this is a positive trend. Where this will be in mid-longer term remains to be seen, but I think now we are still in a moment where this is an important European contribution.
These announcements came after a period of uncertainty, particularly regarding the Lunar Gateway station, which was supposed to be a project that was meant to see collaboration between Europe and European Space Agency and NASA. And NASA eventually suspended it, supposedly after Europe already began building some infrastructure for it. Do you think this was somewhat of a sign of caution for Europe?
Certainly, yes. I think also the process, how it happened, from what we know, it was not under consultation. So it's a situation where, as a junior partner, you may find yourself in a situation where somebody who's actually the owner of the mission, if you like, is the one also to make big decisions. I think the decision has reasons to be made. I wouldn't even question that there are better architectures towards the moon, and maybe faster, which was one of the requirements. I would not think that the situation right now is something that is stabilizing. I think there is still uncertainty beyond the paused gateway, which may be a deleted gateway ultimately. And it has a true question for Europe, how to step up and develop more own and autonomous capability.
And in your view, how could that be done? How could Europe develop autonomous capabilities?
Well, I think it's in two ways. One, you need a strong European ambition and also funding and political support to do this. We're talking about significant investments. They are not just an add-on to existing programs. I don't think they could exist in competition to existing programs like in security and defense, where space is very prominent now. So we will have to see how this translates into the next step. But there has to be something on European level. I think it has to be quick. There is talk about cargo return from the moon. There is talk about also human capability to have your own human transportation. Those are big ambitions. I think they are the right ambitions. Do they need to be done in Europe only? I don't think so. There are other partners. There's still transatlantic partners, but I think we will see diversification of partnerships.
So looking at those global space players, what do you think is Europe's place in that dynamic?
Today, Europe's place is number 3 or 4. US, China, still Russia, then maybe Europe. The question is that as you see the US and China in particular going up and reinforcing their position, for Europe to maintain their place and maybe also grow into a stronger position, there is more investment needed. We have seen it now in security. I think it is desirable to see it in digital, also in the digital economy where space has a role. And last but not least, also in exploration in low Earth orbit and towards the moon.
I would like to move to the topic of space security. There have been reports throughout the last months that Russian satellites have been tracking European satellites, among them a satellite by a Polish-Finnish company, ISI, the data of which may be used by Ukraine. And supposedly in the past, Russia said that any satellites, European satellites aiding Ukraine's military could be a fair target. It also said that it could target potentially commercial/dual-use satellites. Do you think this is a valid mindset?
I think there's a valid concern, certainly. What we see is that when you talk about space as a dual-use technology, this is making the point. Communication satellites, commercial satellites could become target. We've seen this at the beginning of the Ukraine war. So the question is really, what does this really translate into for us? And you will increasingly see these kinds of activity in space. There will be not only a militarization of space, there will be also weaponization of space. I think this is something you can also see emerging in Europe, which would not have been a topic a year or two ago. We probably need real capabilities to also, first of all, be aware, space situational awareness. You need to know what is happening. You need to be able to also defend yourself. And sometimes people today already talk also about capability to act against these threats.
I would like to talk about weaponization of space, but before I get there, I would still like to stay for a second on the topic of tracking activities. So what could be the risks, the main concrete consequences of, for example, Russian satellites tracking European satellites? What type of risks are we talking about?
I think first it is a statement. I think it is a clear posture of Russia that they are capable of doing certain things, which in itself is a message. Secondly, technically, they may do two things. They may try to understand a feature of a satellite, how a satellite is operated, and certainly may interfere and also disable the proper functioning of the system. They may also try and get maybe into some of the data or knowledge over which regions of the planet this satellite is active. So there's a lot of intelligence also to be gained from such a maneuver.
And now we discussed Russia, but as I had some of these conversations in the past, I was also told that US and China also engaged in these types of tracking activities. Is this something that you observed, and do you think that this could be the normal?
Well, I don't have the data to really give a substantive answer. I think it is certainly a capability that any space power will want to have, to be able to really understand and get intelligence on the system around it, and ultimately, if needed, also to be able to act on it. So I believe these capabilities will exist in East and West, and we will see this developing increasingly.
And regarding the weaponization of space, which you mentioned, there have also been reports or concerns that there could be nuclear weapons in space in particular. What could be the consequences of the use of these most extreme measures?
That is a big question. I would maybe go one step back on the question. What we know today is a lot of talk about Golden Dome, the capability to intercept ballistic missiles. That would be an active interference on those missiles from space. This is something that in terms of capability is in the plans in the US and elsewhere. And that would be first step. This is something that may happen and without talking about nuclear capability.
For Poland, space has been an increasingly important topic. Poland last year launched its first military satellite. It is also in talks right now to open an ESA center in the country, focusing on dual-use technologies. What do you think could be the value of such a center for Poland, but also for Europe?
I think this is extremely valuable, and I think it is for many reasons. We have Polish industry, I think, that is stepping up. Poland as a country, also in terms of public finance, is stepping up. You see it more prominently on many stages. And the geography and the need of the country are certainly very representative on what we are discussing here. So it is not a surprise that you would see such a development maybe more on the eastern borders of Europe than elsewhere. So there is a certain logic in developing this further, and I'm very confident this will happen in a positive way.
Since you already mentioned geography, there was actually also one other thing on my mind regarding the recent threats and the changes within the space security architecture. Would you say that space and security and our mindset regarding that changed following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022?
I think it really changed not in 2022. I think it really changed at the Munich Security Conference when Europe realized that we need to develop our own capabilities. There was still an underlying assumption that despite the conflict that already existed, and you can go back before 22, that there was still a protective shield elsewhere, transatlantic. I think the understanding that this is no longer the case in the way it used to be has completely changed the dynamics. And this is the true reason why we are in Germany here, and we've seen a significant step up by the Defense Ministry, 35 billion for the next 5 years. I think this would not have been possible otherwise.
I suppose in the recent years, we've also seen the expansion of the private sector. Among the companies that stand out probably the most is SpaceX. Elon Musk recently said that he's looking into having AI data centers in space. Do you think that at initiatives like this, SpaceX in general, do you think Europe should look at things like this with concern or through a lens of inspiration?
Both. I think it is a concern because there is a risk to be outscaled. The money raised maybe tomorrow, if it is in the range of 75 billion, which is not a budget to act on directly, so the comparison is maybe not complete, but this is 30 years of the budget of the European Union in space today. That gives you an order of magnitude. So there is a certain concern that we will see outscaling. That's not only the rockets, where it is already a fact, it can also be space infrastructure, services, communication, navigation, Earth observation. That is a concern. In terms of inspiration, yes, also. I think it says that there can be entrepreneurs, there can be mechanisms that really support entrepreneurs that may function on a capital market. We will see this now. You will see European money investing into SpaceX. There are estimates of 1 to 3 billion. So this money, capital, is in the system also in Europe. And we should find ways to really leverage what we do now publicly to also use it as a catalyst to attract and scale up private money.
And while we're on the topic of private companies, Vast has, the American company, has recently been stepping up as well, becoming more active. Supposedly there are plans to launch the first commercial space station, even possibly as early as next year. Do you think that this would also change the landscape for human space exploration?
Well, this has been on the agenda since years now. I believe it will be beyond those space stations. They will exist in one form or another. 1, 2, or 3 of them we shall see. It will also be a competitive process. But you'll see a whole activity and industry of in-orbit servicing, fueling, in-orbit transportation that will emerge through this. And this is significant not only for those space stations, but whatever we do in low Earth orbit.
My last question, we're here at Berlin Air and Space Show, so I would like to ask you, what are some of the highlights, some of the things that stood out for you here?
I give you 2. The first one, when you walk into the space pavilion, what you see is a moon. There's a big model of the moon on the central stage. A year or 2 years ago, that would have been blue planet Earth. And Germany in particular, Europe also, had an emphasis on climate and Earth applications, remote sensing, Copernicus. Now it's the moon. And I think this is the first big symbol that we are discussing about the moon, even next to security and defense. And this is remarkable. It was unthinkable maybe just a year ago. The other element which is significant is there have been statements also this morning that Germany really steps up into a leading role. Also, this is something that in space would not have been possible until very recently, and it will have a positive impact on European partners.
Director Moeller, thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
And to our viewers, thank you very much for watching TVP World. I'm Sonja, Agata, Bišćan, and I invite you to stay tuned for more news coverage.